Welcome, everybody, to our May edition of our Cybersecurity Awareness Training Program. We're going to give some folks just a few more seconds here before we get started, so just please hang tight. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. We'll let others join in as they come in. Welcome. Little housekeeping items here. Everyone's mic is muted. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat, and we will go ahead and try to address them. I'll try to keep an eye on that as we go. If I don't see it as we're going through the presentation, I will definitely circle back and get that at the end there. So. Today, my name is Brian. I'm the CTO here at PCA Technology Group. I'm also a certified ethical hacker. And basically all that means is pretty much everything I'm talking about here that the bad guys are doing, I also know how to do. In order to talk intelligently about it, you need to also have the skill set in order to do it. And it also helps in trying to protect some of our clients from these bad actors as well, too. So kicking it off here, why cybersecurity? Well, if you look in the news or read any of the blogs or anything out there, you will probably see cybersecurity is not going away. It's actually getting worse. And we'll get into why that actually is. Last year there was an increase over 2021, and this year is projected to see even more astronomical growth in this area. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The other thing, too, is a lot of companies need compliance and possibly insurance. So anybody that's trying to get cyber insurance, jump on that bandwagon while you can, because it could very well end up going away at some point where they're not even going to insure people anymore. Or it's going to be so expensive that it's just not feasible. The insurance companies are losing a ton of money with this, and they're also holding their customers liable for what they say they're doing. If they're not doing them and they can prove that, they won't pay the claim. So, the obvious point here is to try to avoid a lot of this in the first place. You'll see a lot of logos on this screen here. These are basically just some well-known breaches that have occurred just this year alone. So in the past 4 months, all these companies have been either compromised or breached in some way, shape, or form or fashion. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these later on in the presentation here. The other thing to keep in mind is, on average, hackers are in your system. If they do get into there, they're sometimes in your system for over 7 months before actually either making themselves aware or being detected. What are they doing? Well, basically, most of the time, you're not physically, you as an entity, a company, an individual, are probably not necessarily being physically targeted by those bad actors. You just happen to get entrapped or snared into one of their nets, per se. So what they're doing is once they get their hooks into you and figure out something's on the other line, they try to figure out, okay, first of all, who is this? They try to do some reverse engineering and figure out what company is it? Okay, what data do they have? Is there anything valuable? Credit card, loan information, personal information, social security numbers, insurance numbers, all that kind of stuff. They usually do one of two things. Sometimes they do both. One is they either get that data off your system, they steal that data and post it on the dark web and try to extort money from you to post it. Or the other option is that they may simply encrypt your data, which is ransomware, and basically they lock it where you cannot use it. So unless you have good backups or a means to return back to previous that encryption, you're pretty much left whole in the bag. You really don't have an option. You either start over from scratch, or you pay the bad guys what they're asking and hope they give you the key to unlock that. Now, I will say, in every case that I have ever heard of anybody paying that ransom, there has not been an instance at this point where that decryption key does not work. So you can kind of say they're ethical criminals, perhaps, but it's also a business model. So you got to think that, word gets out that, hey, why would I pay this if they're not going to unlock my data? We get out really, really quick, and then that whole business model would go away. So that's the reason why they actually do usually give you the data, the means to unlock that data. So you might be asking, well, who's responsible for this? From your side, who's responsible for cybersecurity and making sure that we're following best practices? I have an IT department, or I have a third-party IT provider, or it's not my company. I'm just an employee here. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, everybody that's on this call is pretty much responsible, because I will tell you this. The bad actors can get by almost any means of security layers that are put in place by all those people that I mentioned previously, simply by going after the end users. It's the simplest way to bypass all the security that is in place, is to simply target the end users. It's the easiest way in. So instead of me trying to fight my way in from the outside, I'll get somebody from the inside just to open the door for me. And it's really that simple. So the idea with this presentation is to kind of talk about what those tactics are, how those tactics are done, and how, as an end user, you could potentially avoid them, or at least question things that look a little suspicious, or things of that nature, instead of just blindly following along with things that don't look right. So, and we'll talk more about that. So what exactly is it? It's called social engineering, and really all it is manipulating people's tendencies and using it for ill purposes. It's extremely easy to do, and a lot of times people don't even realize that it's happening. So it's really a matter. It could be as simple as holding a door for somebody. If you have an external door that is key coded, where you have to, put your badge or whatever to let that person in. If I want access into that facility, what I'll do, in Western New York area here, which I'm assuming most people are from this area here, I'll wait for a real crappy snowy day or something. I'll sit in the parking lot and wait till I see somebody walking in with one of those badges tapped to their sides or whatever. And I'll come running up behind them, because I'm trying to get in the door without getting caught in the weather. And a lot of times those people will just hold the door for you. I mean, it's not like people are going to slam the door in your face most times. And technically I got past one piece of your security layer by simply just doing that. It's basically tailgating on my way in. And, it's, again, that person in front is just being polite, but I'm manipulating that politeness to gain access at least into the doors. And I might have to get past a front desk person and things like that, but at least bypass one of your areas. And that's how simple it is. It's literally that simple. So it's just you got to keep in mind of what that kind of means for folks as we go on here. So some of the most common attacks, I will be honest, most of the social engineering attacks, probably 90 to 95% of those attacks are done via email with some sort of phishing campaign. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about that. Sometimes social media could potentially be used for at least reconnaissance. So if a bad guy does get in there, or they're looking for potential other victims, once they get inside, they might go to a social media page for the individual that, they track down their social media page on either Facebook, Instagram, whatever, Snapchat, or possibly from a business side too. They could potentially use, track them down in LinkedIn and then figure out, oh, well, here's a coworker, blah, 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 and keep going on with that. The other thing too is a lot of times, you can actually get a lot of password reset information from social media as well. You may think you're harmlessly answering a survey sent out by one of your friends. What you might not realize is it probably wasn't sent by one of your friends. It was just shared by one of your friends. And when you answer a lot of those questions in those surveys, you may not put two and two together, but 99% of them are actually password resets questions. So you might be, oh, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food out of this group? What was your first car? What did you pass your license in? If you're answering those, you're actually answering that could be what your first car is, what your favorite color is, what your favorite food is, who your second grade teacher was, all that kind of stuff, your high school mascots, all that stuff is password reset things. So you could be inadvertently answering password reset questions for individuals that are sending those out if it's malicious intent. So just keep that in mind. We already mentioned some of the trends. Ransomware, which we kind of briefly talked about. We talked about extortion, which is them, threatening to post information on the dark web if you don't pay them X amount of money. There is some automation going on now too, and I'm sure everybody has heard about the AI or artificial intelligence that is hitting the widespread media at this point. And ChatGPT or Bard is particulars. Those are actually being potentially used for malicious purposes too. They could be used for crafting very, very good phishing email campaigns. They can also be leveraged for potential brute forcing passwords and things of that nature. So it also makes reconnaissance a lot easier, because what you may not realize is, while the AI isn't sentient, which means it's not thinking for itself, it's being fed information. The AI is basically a conglomeration of pretty much anything that's on the web. Depending on what version you're on, some of it might be from 2021 and beyond, or the newer version of ChatGPT is current with current events. So anything you're asking ChatGPT, it's actually leveraging all the information that's available on the public internet at this point. So it's just basically using the information that's already out there and giving you the answer without you having to search for it. So it makes reconnaissance a lot easier too. If I shove somebody's name in there, you could potentially find information about them a lot faster with that than I could do it on my own. Who's behind it? Criminal groups. Sometimes it's third world governments. As I mentioned, this is a pretty profitable business model. So some of the third world governments have decided to create entities that try to, if they're not friendly with the U.S. Or not allies of ours, they tend to target us as slim pickings basically, and try to extort money out of companies based in the U.S. Very rarely is it malicious insiders, but there have been a few cases that didn't end well for those insiders. But where the bad guys are trying to manipulate to somebody or entice somebody to let them in. It wasn't a mistake. They're basically trying to say, hey, we'll give you X amount of money if you let us in, or give us this or give us that. First of all, what you're doing is a felony, a federal felony. That you got to think of that first of all. So the ramifications of getting caught doing that is not even worth the risk. But there was a few instances. Amazon fell victim to this. There was a mobile carrier too that also fell victim to this. Both of those entities, individuals got caught very quickly. Like I said, it didn't end well for them. So, but just be aware that you need to know who it is that you have working for you too. And we kind of mentioned about the attack vectors. Again, very rarely is it physically on site, but most of it is done either cloud or mobile and things of that nature. So that leads us into web surfing. So if you were doing any type of web surfing from your work PC, what I recommend is to try to keep that web surfing limited to business use only. If you do that, it definitely limits your attack vectors to a much smaller footprint than it would if you're just randomly surfing everything under the sun that's not work related and things like that. I'm going on vacation, I want to figure out the hot spots or the best restaurants or this or that. Do that on your own computer in your own time. Keep that off of business stuff. I kind of already mentioned about social media. Unless you're using social media for any type of marketing purposes, and I know some businesses do that, I suggest staying away from social media as much as you possibly can, only because, as I mentioned, a lot of those Facebook posts and Instagram things and whatever else is out there, a lot of it could potentially be malicious. And instead of guessing whether it is or isn't, if you just stay off of it, it's one less attack vector that you have to worry about while you're on work resources. The other thing too is keep your browsers updated. If you're a client of ours under our managed services arrangement, we actually do this for you. So we actually have plugins that actually will update your Firefox, your Chrome. Edge is done through Microsoft updates, which we also control. But if you're not on one of our managed services agreements, or you're not a client of ours, just make sure that you're keeping your browsers up to date, because very frequently throughout the week, sometimes some of these browsers are getting updated weekly and it's patching things that the bad guys could potentially leverage by just you simply visiting a malicious website that's looking for that unpatched security thing. So if you see an update come up and your browser saying, oh, hey, there's an update pending, take the time and update it. That way you're running the most current version. The other thing too is be suspicious of pop-ups and download links. Most of the new browsers nowadays do have pop-up blockers built into them, but there's still some ways that they can craft things that will potentially pop windows up. And what you may not realize is the bad guys, they tend to do pop unders, and what that is it's something that while you're seeing that screen, it says, oh, hey, subscribe now or whatever. And if you click on either the X at the top of the window or the close button at the bottom, if there's a pop under, if it's a malicious version, if there's a pop under underneath that, while you're clicking on those buttons, is also clicking on that window behind that you can't see, and it's downloading something potentially on your computer where they could eventually let a bad guy in from the outside. So again, if you keep your surfing limited to company use, you'll avoid a lot of those potential pitfalls, because hopefully the sites you're visiting and stuff are well-known sites and you don't fall into this trap. However, if you do find yourself in a situation when you're not sure if that window is malicious or not, instead of clicking on those areas, you could potentially hit Control W on your keyboard. Works on Windows, works on Mac as well. That will close down the window with focus, which usually is that pop-up window. If that doesn't work, Alt F4 will actually close the entire browser down for you. So again, you'll be able to get out of that without having to click on any of those areas to potentially fall into victim on any of those malicious sites, give or take. So here's another thing that is recent here. The bad guys realize that people don't like to remember passwords. So what they're doing is they are leveraging something called SSO, or single sign-on. So what that is basically it allows you to log into another site using an account that you already have set up. A lot of times it's either your Apple account, maybe it's your Google account, perhaps it's your Facebook account, Steam, Discord, are some of the more popular ones. So what it does, it allows you to leverage that existing login to log into another site where you only have to remember the login for whatever that credentials that you're using there. So in this case, you can kind of see in the screen here, this is an example where you're visiting Canva, and in this case it looks like it's Google that you're going to try to use this for. So you can sign in with your Google account, and when it does that, it will give you you can sign in using your Google account to this here. The problem is that the bad guys have set up malicious versions of this, and they are extremely difficult to visually detect. And I'll show you some examples here of what I'm talking about. So in this example here, this screen here is obviously Facebook. And if you look on the left-hand side is the phishing one, and on the right-hand side is the real version. If you look at them, just the way they're displayed there, they look identical, besides the fact one says phishing and the other one says real. They both have the padlocks at the top. If you actually look at the URLs on both of those, which is, obviously the website address is posted there, they are also exactly the same. So if you click on the locks, for those that are technical savvy, to check the SSL cert, they will match. So the fake one matches the real one. So what happens is now if you put your information into the phishing one, what it'll do, it will let you log in. However, it's also sending your credentials to the bad guys. So it basically stole your credentials because you gave it to them, but it's also letting you leverage leverage the site, and you don't even realize it until it's too late. So again, extremely difficult to detect visually. I'll show you another example. This one is Google. So this is basically the same thing. The left-hand side is a phishing one. The right-hand side is the real one. Again, if you look at those, the only difference between the two is obviously on the phishing one, just in this particular example, does have create an account at the bottom there. That necessarily doesn't raise any red flags for anybody because, you know, you could create an account. It just might just be the version of it, how it was replicated when they did this. But again, if you look at the padlocks, you know, you click on that, it's going to say the Google cert. If you look at the URLs, the URLs are exactly the same point for point. So visually, there is absolutely no way for anybody to tell the difference between a real version of this and a fake version of this. But I will tell you how to do it. So there is one way that you can at least right now, there's one way that you can tell whether you're physically using a real version of this single sign-on or whether it's potentially a malicious one. So what I want you to do is if you go to the top of the browser bar on that phishing one and you right click it or left click it and try to drag it out of the screen, like off your screen where it breaks outside the browser. If it lets you break past the browser border that you're in, because this is going to pop up in the center of that screen. If it lets you break out of the browser with that window that you're dragging across, that is the real version. If you find that you can't break outside of the browser borders on either side, that is a fake version, and do not put your credentials in there. It's because of how the bad guys are leveraging the technology and how they're painting this on your screen. It won't let that window actually break outside the browser. So that's the only real way you can tell without getting real nitty gritty into real technical stuff. But again, just try to drag that window off the screen. If it breaks outside and opens up like outside the browser, where it drags completely off the screen, you are pretty much confident that that's the real version of it. So you could potentially use that. So with that, we're going to move on to email. As I mentioned, this is probably the heaviest used social engineering tactic. So we're going to spend a few minutes in here talking about what that looks like. So much like browsing, we want to make sure that you utilize your work email for work use, not personal. You know, this tends to be a big problem, at least later in the years, around Christmas time, where everyone does their Black Friday shopping. They get their coupon codes, they get their shopping list, they do all of that stuff. And they tend to use their work email for that because they're, you know, they want to make sure they don't miss the greatest and latest deal and all that stuff and everything else. Well, that's not good practice to do. And the reason why that isn't is because the bad guys leverage a lot of fake purchases, a lot of fake invoices, shipping notices, all that kind of stuff from eBay, PayPal, Amazon, all those things. They send those to you in hopes that you're going to open them up. And usually when you open them up, it has some type of malicious thing in there, or it sends you to another site where they're trying to entice you to click on something or enter credentials in. So again, if you're not using your work email for those type of transactions and you get one of those emails, you can easily just quickly visually look at it and say, wait, I'm getting an Amazon shipping notice. I don't use my work email for it. I don't even need to bother looking at it. Just delete it immediately. You don't even have to open it. You know, and the same thing with eBay and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you are purchasing things from one of those entities, you're going to have to be a little careful because, you know, you keep track of what your purchases are, because again, the bad guys use those tactics a lot, and it catches a lot of people. So just be aware of that. The other thing too is don't access your personal email while you're connected to a work network or from your work PC. Reason being, you know, obviously if you go to check your webmail on your personal account and you open up one of those things, you're actually opening it up on work resources. Even though you're doing it through the web, it still could potentially infect your work resources. And the same thing with your phone. You know, if you're connected to a wireless network that is company and it's not separated from the work network, then it could, you know, infect that too as well. So if you need to check your email, I would suggest using your data plan that's on your phone and not the wireless, just to be on the safe side, or wait till you get home and check it from home. That's the best advice for that. Anybody that's using Outlook, it used to be called the preview pane. It's now called the reading pane. And what if you are using Outlook and you do happen to be one of the users that enjoy using the reading pane, I would highly suggest disabling that. Reason being is because that feature is actually opening up every email that hits your inbox automatically without your interaction. And as I just mentioned previously, you want to be able to screen those emails before you just blindly go opening any of this stuff. There could be tracking codes in there. If a bad guy's trying to see if they have a live email address, you simply opening that will make a call home because it's got a hidden image in there that you can't see, and things like that. So you want to be able to visually look at the emails before you're automatically opening them. And like I said, this feature is actually doing that for you. So you want to disable that. To do that, you could just go up to it is highlighted on the screen here. You can go to the View tab, and then you'll see there's an option there that says Reading Pane. If you click that little drop-down arrow there next to Reading Pane, it should say, I think it's right, bottom, and off. Just hit off on that, and then that window on the right-hand side here, that column will go away, and then your emails will spread out the rest of that real estate space there. So now you have to physically double click on the emails to open them, and that's exactly what we want. We want you to interact with those emails so you can look and say, hey, wait a minute, this is an Amazon shopping notice. I don't need to open that. I can delete it, but if you have this function turned on, it will open it automatically because it hits the top of your box there and opens every one of those emails. So just make sure you have that function turned off. So we talked a lot about phishing emails. What exactly is a phishing email? Well, here's an example of it. And this is just a very simplistic version of it. But this is one that typically is sent out. They pretend to be an entity that they're not. But in this case, it's someone, it looks like it's coming from Microsoft Outlook, and it's saying your password's expired and you need to make sure that you change that. And just for your convenience, we decided to include 2 links in here for you in case one link wasn't enough. We'll send you 2 links just to try to entice you to click on one of those 2 areas to change your password, because we know how important email is. Can't go without email. Hey, there's 1 of 2 links in here. I'll just happily click on those. And that's exactly what they want to do. They want you to click on one of those 2 links. So what happens if you click on one of those 2 links? It depends. There's 2 different ways depending on how good the bad guy is that sent you to this. First of all, this is not a real email. This is a fake email made to look like a real one. And again, they want you to click on one of those 2 links. So you click on one of those 2 links, it's going to take you to a site that looks like Microsoft, and it's going to ask you for your email address, which is usually your login. And then it's also going to ask you for your password. And then it's going to do one of 2 things. It's going to error out, and then it's going to ask you for that information again, and you're going to put it in again. It's going to error out, and you're going to keep going on and on and on and realize something just isn't right. But the real smart bad guys, it will do that one time, and then the next time it will actually let you log in. And what happens is every time you're putting in your username and password on that site is a fake site made to look like Microsoft, and it is, again, taking that information that you're typing in there and sending it to the bad guys. So, the one that keeps going on and on and on, of course, it's not going to work because you're not on the right Microsoft site. So you're just constantly going through. And if you think maybe you forgot your password and you're putting a different password in, well, now you keep sending them potentially all the passwords that you use. And now they've got a list to go through to try to find where those work and not work. Whereas the one that doesn't work once, what they do is that one does get sent to the bad guys, but then they redirect you to the correct Microsoft site. And if you're not watching carefully, you don't realize the site actually changed. And now you're actually logging into the real site, and you just think you fat fingered your password the first time around and don't even realize it was a fake site that you went to. So how do you avoid it? It's pretty simple. Anytime you get one of these emails that look like it's coming from Microsoft or any entity, don't click on any of these embedded links. Don't even waste your time with it. What I want you to do instead is I want you to open up a brand new browser that you're opening up yourself. So whether it's Firefox, Edge, Chrome, whatever your choice of flavor is of the week, open that up, go to Microsoft site yourself by you typing it in there, and then log in. That way, you know you're getting to the right Microsoft site, and you're not going to fall for any of these, potential malicious links in these embedded emails. So that's the easiest way to do it. This is just another example of it. This example here is just coming from a pretend bank asking you to verify a potential withdrawal in another country. Again, they conveniently include that link in there for you intentionally. Again, you click on that link, it's going to send you to a site that looks like Trusted Bank in this case, and you're going to put your login information in there. And now you're going to effectively give away your banking information to the bad guys as well too. So if you get one of these emails, again, as I mentioned, don't ever click on any of these links embedded in these unless you're just expecting it, and I'll talk about what that means. But in this case here, if you're a Trusted Bank customer, what I want you to do is open up a brand new browser, go to trustedbank.com by you typing it in yourself, log in there, and if this is valid somewhere in your login system, it's going to, or in your message system there, it's going to tell you that this is going on if this is real. So that's the easiest way to avoid this. I'm sorry, jump too far ahead here. So spear phishing. Spear phishing, this one here is a little more directed. So the first one is phishing. Spear phishing is a little more targeted. So I like to think of this analogy that, you're walking up to a pond in the middle of nowhere. You have a handful of breadcrumbs, and you don't know if there's fish in there or any type of creatures in that pond at all. And you're just going to take the handful of breadcrumbs, you're going to throw it in there, you're going to wait to see if something eats them. Whereas spear fishing, there's fish in there, and you're bringing, let's say there's a bass in there or something. The bass likes minnows or they like worms, whatever. You're bringing the right bait to try to get that fish because that fish is in there. That's kind of the same thing with spear fishing. And this tends to target HR folks or payroll folks. And it usually is someone pretending to be an internal employee. And you can see in the example here, it's basically asking someone in HR or payroll to change their direct deposit information. And here is the information I want you to change it to, and I want it done ASAP immediately. So what happens, again, if you don't have the correct policies and procedures in place at your company, and you just blindly follow this request via email, what's going to happen is come payroll time, very quickly after during that day, you're going to have this employee that you think you got this email from come up to you and say, hey, my paycheck is missing, and you're going to realize that you've just been duped into sending that person's payroll to another fake account that was basically probably set up at a bank with stolen credentials, a stolen identity. The minute the money hit that account, it was emptied out, and that's it. You're out that payroll because you're going to have to compensate the real employee, for what you sent to the bad guys because you didn't verify this. So never, ever, ever do any type of financial transactions unless you can, one, either physically verify with the person face to face that they are doing the request, or you could potentially call them on a known phone number, not some number that they're transmitting across in this email. It's got to be a known number that you already had on record for them. And a lot of times it's done in writing too, especially when it comes to payroll requests. So that should be done in writing. But you can also do it with a known phone number. But again, don't use any, don't rely on a number that's being passed back and forth for in this particular email here. So. Here's another example. Well, this is whaling. Obviously, you can see things are progressing here. Whaling is the big fish. Usually, it's either someone pretending to be the sea-level folks or high-level folks, and they usually target someone that either works in underneath them, or it is somebody that could potentially do the could potentially be in a position underneath them, like an assistant or something of that nature. So. In this case, this is somebody pretending to be the CFO. So they're contacting somebody probably that works underneath them in the financial department, saying, hey, are you busy? I'm out of the office and I need you to process me a wire transfer. The other tactic is, hey, I need you to go buy me some Amazon gift cards or eBay gift cards or whatever. Let me know and I'll send you the details. So again, if you get these type of requests, you need to either walk over to the person's office and just say, hey, did you really send this to me? Or reach them at a known number. Never again blindly follow this stuff with email, because I've seen so many companies get hit by these gift cards time and time and time again. And it's just it can so easily be avoided. So while it might be only $500 gift cards, you do 4 or 5 of those, they add up pretty quickly, especially when you're doing it multiple times. So it's one of those things where it can easily be avoided. So again, you get one of these requests for any type of financial transactions via email, you need to verify that it's really the person that they're claiming to be. So one of the things that you can do to help with that is, if you're a Microsoft 365 client or user, that's where your email is hosted through. And some other platforms do it too, but predominantly most clients are M365. You can actually activate what's called an external banner. So what is important about that? Well, this tells you that is coming from the outside world. Now, why is that important? Well, first of all, it's a quick visual way of saying, you know what? Hey, this email is coming from outside. Well, where does that apply? Well, I can show you where it applies. Let's go back to the spear phishing side. So this is someone pretending to be an internal employee. Guess what? If you have that external banner activated, because this is not the real employee on the inside, this would actually have that banner at the top right above where their name is there, where they say, hi, Shannon. So it would actually have that banner listed right there. So immediately you open this email up and you see that banner, but it's coming from what is supposedly an internal person or an internal employee. That is a huge red flag that would be like, wait a minute, that something's not right here. Because if it was really the internal person, it would never have that external banner. So activating this banner is extremely, extremely important. And it's an easy way to just visually test. And the same thing with the whaling one too. Again, that banner would be above Dear Sean, so you would immediately see the first thing, as long as you put it at the top, and that's where I recommend putting it. It's going to put that banner right at the top, right above that Dear Sean, and you're going to see that's the first thing you're going to see. So wait, my CFO is telling me to do something, but it's coming from the outside. No, if it was really your CFO, it would be routed internally in the internal email system, and it would never have that banner on it, unless they're for some reason using their personal email. But if it's coming from the real company person, it would not have that. So if you're not using this, I think we have this activated on almost all of our clients, unless there's a specific reason for it. And again, if you're not a client of ours, I highly recommend you activate this where you can. So the bad guys also realize that, you know what, hey, some people are getting a little smart. They're not falling for the same old tactics and things like that. So what they're doing now is another form of phishing, but it's a much easier way for them. If they can get somebody to fall for it, it's called consent phishing. So what they do is they create a fake application that basically is going to prompt you for permissions into your email system or your Microsoft system. Now, if you ever see one of these and you are a client of ours or you have an internal staff, make sure you bring this to their attention or call our support desk, because it's very rare that you're going to see this. Now, there are some applications that do leverage this stuff, but I would sooner have it be a false positive than an actual attempt to breach your account. In this case, this is obviously a malicious example. You can tell by it says risky app there, and it's also unverified. But what happens if you just blindly accept this, because you're busy and you don't have time to waste on this and talk to my IT company and all this. I just don't have time for it. I'm just hitting accept. I don't care. Okay, well, what happens is you're basically allowing the creator of this malicious app full-blown access into your entire Microsoft 365 ecosystem. That means they can access your email, they can read your email, they can read your calendars, they can pull your contacts, they can read your files, they can do your SharePoint, they can read your Teams, they can do everything, because you're basically giving them the keys to the kingdom. And oh, by the way, even if you have multi-factor enabled, guess what this does? This bypasses multi-factor too. So if you just blindly hit accept here, you've just basically given full-blown access to the bad guys without even maybe realizing it. So again, if you get one of these, what I would highly recommend is if you do have an internal staff, bring it to their attention, or reach out to us if you're a client of ours. We can very, very quickly remote in, take a quick peek at it and see, you know what, hey, is it legitimate or not? And in some cases, like I said, some apps do legitimately ask for this. But again, I would much rather spend the time and just a few minutes that it takes to verify that it is valid or not versus you mistakenly falling victim to this. So the other type of thing too that's been going on, ever since COVID, a lot of folks are leveraging heavily on the QR codes. So there's obviously something called quishing. And what they do is they just send you a QR code, which is that funky looking, symbol there in that email that they want you to scan with your phone. And basically, you really don't know where you're going until you get there, because the way these codes are designed, they use shortened website addresses as well, so it's kind of encrypted and cryptic on how it gets there. But they're using these too. If I was physically targeting folks, it could very well be as easily as just going into restaurants and dropping some of the malicious ones on tables, because people think they're touchless menu systems. And some restaurants do use those for those, but it's also an easy way for a malicious person to just drop a replacement on the table, and people could be scanning things maliciously. So just be very, very careful on what you're scanning. And just an example of how easy it is to actually social engineer somebody with this. It wasn't the past Super Bowl, but it was the one previous, that one of the commercials, and it was an absolute brilliant commercial. Was basically one of these QR codes during the game. It was one of these QR codes on I forget if it was one of these in white on a black screen, or if it was a black screen or a white screen with one of these in black. But it was just basically one of these codes bouncing around the screen like Pong, for those of us that are old enough to remember what that is. It was just bouncing around the screen, and they had over 1 million people scan that code. There was no words, no nothing, just this code. 1 million people, 1 million viewers actually scanned that code at some point during that commercial. Now, this was not a malicious version. It was absolute brilliant advertising. However, it just goes to show you that 1 million people just blindly scanned a code, had no idea what it was, just blindly scanned the code. So that's how easy it is to manipulate people. It's that simple. Curiosity, tends to kill the cat sometimes, as they say. And, it could, if that was malicious, they would have had 1 million victims. So just keep that in mind. So that leads us on to USB and mobile devices. USB are those little flash keys that used to be prominent. I know they may not be as prominent anymore, the little flash drives that sometimes people used. If you ever find one of those laying around, please do not put that into your machine without somebody at least verifying the what might be on that. If you're one of our customers, just wait till one of our engineers go out there and they'll bring it back, and I'll put it in a sandbox area where if there is something malicious on it, it will contain it. We'll clean it off and then give it back, or we'll try to verify who the rightful owner is. But it's very easy. All you have to do is plug that in. If it's a malicious version, it could, again, run something without you even realizing it by you just simply plugging it in. So the other thing, too, if you do use these, sometimes architectural companies use these because their drawings and stuff, if they're transferring drawings back and forth, it's hard to send over the internet because of how large they are. Sometimes they use these. Just make sure you got your virus updated, your software updates are being done, too. So you're scanning before you just blindly plug these things in without any type of protection. So. The other thing, too, is, pretty much everybody has a smartphone nowadays. And what you may not realize is that these things are battery hogs. However, the idea is that a lot of folks will take their charge cords and most of the time they're USB. And they will take those and actually either plug them into their laptops or plug them into their desktops, because it basically will charge. And while, yes, it will charge, what you may not realize is that it's not only charging your phone, it's also turning your phone into a USB device. So it's basically a flash drive. It's one of those things where you obviously, if something malicious is on your phone just waiting to be plugged into a Windows PC or a Mac PC, it could eventually or potentially infect one of those machines. So I highly recommend not using your device to charge. What I would recommend doing is bringing your wall brick that comes with that, the part that plugs into the wall. Use that to charge your PC, not your physical PC or your cell phone. I'm sorry, not your physical PC. The other thing too, and I know I've been talking about this for a while now, and I finally saw just recently last month that the FBI is also worrying about this too. This is a big issue. Anybody that's using public charging stations, it's the same concept. So basically, it's a malicious public charging station that is set up by some bad actor. It could be at a hotel lobby, it could be at a shopping mall, it could be at an airport, it could be at a coffee shop, whatever. The idea is that you get somebody that, oh no, I'm almost out of juice on my phone. I've gotta charge my phone. I can't go without my cell phone. So they plug into one of these public charging stations, and if it's malicious, again, I just mentioned that it will charge your phone, but it's also stealing everything off your phone because it's turning your phone into a USB device. So it's basically stealing your contacts, it's stealing your pictures, everything off your phone. It could potentially be pulling off. It's called juice jacking, and it's just one of those things where if you're out and about and your phone's dying, wait till you get to your car. Use a charge your car in your car, or wait till you get home. Because the risk isn't worth potentially plugging into one of those public charging stations if it's malicious. So just keep that in mind. So that leads us into our next topic, which comes to passwords. This is usually the favorite part of it, and I've been talking a little bit about this too. We recommend complex, secure, and unique passwords. And basically what that means, and this changed just recently, and I mentioned it was going to change. So at the beginning of the year, well, let me start this. Probably about midway last year, I think we were at 7 characters was our recommended password length. By the end of the year, we were at 9 characters, and then the beginning of this year, we were at 10 characters, and now 4 months in, we're at 11 characters. This is continually going to change, and I'll show you why here in a short period of time. Excuse me. But right now, I am recommending 11 characters at minimum. So your password has to be at least 11 characters. It has to contain at least 1 special character, at least 1 uppercase letter, and also at least 1 number. So everybody on the call is probably, and that your passwords are unique across all of your different login sites and things like that, so you don't reuse the same password. Everybody on the call is probably like, yeah, right. How am I going to do this? How am I going to remember all these passwords and so forth for everything that I log into? Well, there's a couple different ways. So the first and foremost one is you could potentially use an online manager. And that is one that's on the internet, and it basically will store your passwords for you. A lot of times it will pre-populate them based on whatever site you're going to, and it recognizes a site, so it'll populate your password. I personally don't trust those. I don't use those either. And if there was anybody that had a keen eye in the beginning of the presentation, one of the companies that got breached just this year for the 4th time now, was LastPass, which is also a password storage cloud manager. So you can obviously guess the bad guys are going to target those password online managers because they know that's where the passwords are. There's really about 5 real big ones out there, and out of the 5, 3 have been breached at least once. 2 of them have been breached multiple times, and as I mentioned, LastPass this is now the 4th time they've been breached. And it's not going to stop. I mean, it's just reality. So I'm not saying you can't use those online managers. You're welcome to do it. I personally don't use them, and I would sooner keep my passwords on me myself. So what do I do, and what other ways could you potentially do this? So there's a couple ways. Obviously, you want to store these in a secure way. So the way I do it, I actually use an encrypted USB key. So what that means is that key is locked with a 24-character password. So I have to remember 1 password. to unlock that USB key. So I plug that USB key in, I put my 24 character password in, and then it gives me access to it's basically a text file that has all my logins and what appears to be my passwords listed in this text file. And I say appears because it's not truly my passwords. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a couple different ways you can do it. It's just like the same thing if you're writing them physically down, and I'm not saying that's what you do, and keep them in your drawer or something, but if you physically write your passwords down, you are purposely skipping some characters on that piece of paper. So if someone comes across that piece of paper and those missing characters, whether they're in the beginning, whether they're on the end, whether it's a combination of beginning or the end, those missing characters are all the same. You know the pattern. You also know what characters are missing. And when you go to enter that password, you put those missing characters with that pattern in as you're typing those in. That way, if someone comes across that piece of paper, no one would ever know there's missing characters. They're going to go down through and try them as they're written, and they're not going to work, and they're going to think it's an old password list and give up. That's one way to do it. So it's known missing characters, and you know the pattern, you know the missing characters. They're basically all the same, and it doesn't matter because they're not physically there. The other option is you can add extra characters. Now this is a little trickier because if you're adding extra characters, so basically you're putting extra characters that aren't your password, but you are adding characters. Let's say you're doing 2 at the beginning and 2 at the end. What you can't do is you can't use the same characters if you're recording them in some way, shape, or form. Because if someone were to look at that list and see that, oh, every one of these passwords has AB and Z XY or whatever at the end of them, they're going to peel those off thinking they are extra characters, and they're going to figure it out. So you've got to randomize those extra characters. It doesn't matter what they are because, obviously they're pointless to you, but just visually, you're trying to throw off a bad guy if someone happens to come across that list. So in some presentations, I've actually opened up my password file and physically displayed it because I use a combination of both of these. I have extra and missing characters in various patterns. I know what they are, and I'm not concerned about anybody trying to figure it out because you're never going to know what the pattern is, how many, or what the missing characters or added characters are. So there's times I've done that. I don't have time to do it today, but I'm just throwing that out there. So that's ways that you could potentially record them in a secure manner, or you could use the online password manager too. So now, why are we so worried about passwords and why is this changing so fast? Well, you can see here in 2022, and this was, I'll show you the updated version here, but by 10 characters and using the complexity that we recommend, the numbers, uppercase, lowercase symbols, at the beginning of the year, it took 5 months to basically brute force that. And what that means is taking every possible combination of that 10 character password and running it through and trying to figure out the password. So at 10 characters, it would take approximately 5 months to get through every possible combination. The other thing is 11 characters. It's going to take 34 years, and you can see at 12 characters, it's going to take about 3,000 years. That was in 2022. Now this heavily relies on, well, now there's a new factor, but this heavily relies on hardware speeds, and hardware speeds are so astronomical right now that these numbers change almost month to month, and they literally do. So, in the past 4 months, I've been preaching that, hey, we got to do 10 characters because we're at 5 months. Well, guess what? Now we're in 2023, and guess where that 5 months puts you? Oh, look at that. Oh, now it only takes 2 weeks. Oh, goodness gracious. So now we've got a problem. So now that 34 years at 11 characters just dropped 31 years because of the hardware speeds. And add you the AI that's available now too. So it literally cut 31 years off of an 11 character password. I will tell you by the next 3 months, this is probably going to be changing again. So we constantly update this stuff, but you can see why we're recommending 11 characters now, because those numbers are just getting dwindled down so fast because of the hardware speeds and the capability of doing it. So just keep that in mind. I did mention this earlier a little bit about multi-factor, and what multi-factor is, it's a concept of something you have and something you know. So the something you know is it's your password, your username, and your password. So the idea is that um, that isn't the only way for you to log in. So you log in with that, and then it's going to ask you usually for a code, or it could potentially send you something to your phone saying, "Hey, is this you trying to log in?" Hit yes or to accept or whatever. So it's a second form of authentication. So if in the event that your username and password are compromised, this multi-factor is potentially keeping the bad guys out of your account. Now, there's an issue. Like I said, some of it uses codes that are generated, and the other thing is that it's a push model too. So keep in mind, this is not 100% foolproof. It does stop about 90% of the hacker attempts. And I will show you some other flaws too. So if you're using the push version of this, the bad guys are using a technique called MFA fatigue. So they figure out that you are using push, and what they do is this only works in the event that your credentials are compromised. So if you all of a sudden are starting to get all kinds of, hey, is this you? 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 That's the point. They're trying to bomb you with all these requests to the point where you just say, oh God, please make it stop, and you just hit yes. Guess what? You just let the bad guys in by doing that. What you need to do is if you start seeing those requests coming in, flying in multiple times, you need to let either your IT people know internally, or if you're a client of ours, let us know, because your credentials are definitely compromised, and we need to change them immediately to stop that. So that's a sure way sign of making sure that that gets addressed quickly. So. All right, let's see here. We're running up on time. So that is pretty much about all I have. Again, just some reminders here. Don't click on the links within emails, as I mentioned. The only time you should click on a link is like if it's something you just generated. So like if you do a password reset or something like that, sometimes it will send an email saying, hey, please click here to verify this was you. That's something you just generated. In that case, you could click a link potentially. But in all their cases, I highly recommend just opening up new browsers and going there yourself. Also, make sure you're verifying what the person is who they claim to be. Any type of financial transactions, never follow them blindly via email. Using strong passwords and MFA, make sure they're stored securely, whatever method that might be. Make sure you're also disabling accounts of any former employees, whether they left on their own or whether you terminated them. Many times, these old accounts have been compromised, like the gas line hack that happened about a year ago. That was an old user that had left there months previously, and the account was still active, and that's what they used to leverage to get in. So if that would have been disabled, that pipeline attack probably would have never have happened. So, and then make sure you're regularly backing up your data. So make sure that your best way back from a potential ransomware, if you ever fall for that, is with a good backup. So that's your saving grace basically. So with that, thank you for your time. Hopefully this definitely makes you aware of some of the tactics that the bad guys are using. It makes you better equipped at least to question things. I'm not saying you're going to be an expert at this, but at least, if something seems like it's fishy, bring it to someone's attention, because it's much harder to dupe two people than it is one person, especially if there's another person that's in the mix that entity may not be necessarily interacting with, especially like Vmail. So if I'm going after a single entity, I'm interacting with that person. If they bring somebody else in that I'm not doing that with, then it's one of those issues where it's much harder to manipulate people when I don't even know I'm, dealing with somebody else in the mix. So what's next, obviously, we'll send out anybody that attended this will get a certificate of completion in case you're going here for compliance issues. That will at least take care of that. There are some more things. There's some podcasts on our YouTube channel where I get a little more depth into some of I do wireless, public wireless, and things like that. I skipped that here because it's a big topic. They're audio only, about 15 minutes. You're welcome to take a listen to them. I cover social media and things like that too. So you can also stay tuned to our events here. We are also doing a raffle giveaway too. If you do follow us on LinkedIn, there's a raffle giveaway. I believe that was mentioned in chat here. To find out more information about that. If you do have any questions, you can send them out to info@pcatg. Let me just do a quick look here. We do have a question here. Can you please review the dragging outside the window to differentiate the real? So basically, as I mentioned, let me go back to that slide real quick here. And basically what you do is you grab the actual window that the single sign-on is using here. Give me 1 second here. I'm sorry. I skipped over it. Yeah, right here it is. So if you just basically you grab where the top of that bar, where the minus and the plus and the X are, if you drag the middle of that, if you try to drag it off the screen. So this would be painted inside of a browser. Unfortunately, you can't see my cursor right now, but if you click on that top bar and try to drag it outside of the browser window that this would normally be painted in, if it's the real one, it will literally break outside of the browser. So it will open up like on your desktop or in a different window on its own, and it'll display on your desktop. If it's the fake one would not let you do that. It would contain itself into the actual browser window. So that's the best way to do that. Hopefully that answers that question for you. I do not see anybody else here. You're welcome. Anybody else? I don't see any. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, everybody. I appreciate it. And again, we do hold these monthly. I change them up every month because the tactics change. Trying to keep everybody aware of what's out there, and hopefully this keeps you a little bit more safer. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, reach out to info. We'd be happy to answer them for you. Thanks and have a great day.